The question I think that needs to be answered is, why is he lying? Why do you keep fighting a war that's lost? The corruption shows the true class nature of it. It's a capitalist war fought by Western imperialism against Russia. Welcome to Against the Stream, the podcast that analyzes world events in order to uncover the true class interests that lie behind them. While we aim for the highest objectivity, we do not claim to be impartial. We stand unapologetically on the side of the workers and the poor, the people who make this world go around. This podcast is for them. Stacks of cash, $100 million, a golden toilet, wiretaps, and code names. It sounds like something from a heist movie, but it's only the latest scandal involving the inner circle of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Meanwhile, in Britain, the Labour Party is descending further into chaos as the knives are out for Keir Starmer. We're supposed to live in a democracy, but the closer you look, the more you realize that the true decisions are made behind closed doors, far away from any ordinary person. Those are the topics that we were dealing with in today's show. My name is Hamid Alizadeh, and I'm here today for the first time with Ben Curry. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Hamid.
Ben is editor of the website, the international website of the Revolutionary Communist International, Marxist.com. And he's also a member of the International Secretariat of the RCI. So, Ben, it sounds like something from a heist movie, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. We have this golden toilet. What's his name? Timur... I forget the guy's name.
Timur Mindic. Well, I mean, it could be a heist movie because actually... the key person involved in this scandal that's now rocking Ukraine is Timur Mindic, one of his close friends, and possibly his closest business associate. They both own a film production company, 50% each. Now, this is a scandal that's been unraveling in the last few days. It's been revealed by NABU and SAPO, which is the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, which, as you can guess from the name, anti-corruption organizations. They have done an investigation over the past 15 months involving more than 1,000 hours of wiretaps. And what they have uncovered, what they're revealing so far that they've uncovered, is a $100 million embezzlement scheme, mainly around this guy Timur Mindic, but involving a whole series of people. We saw there's been 70 raids just in the first days of this campaign. 2 ministers have been involved, and this is obviously sheds a little bit of light also onto why Zelensky tried to close down NABU and SAPO just a few months ago in July, but he forced to reinstate them because there were so many mass protests.
Yeah, I think it's becoming quite clear that Zelensky knew what was going on probably back in July, that the noose was tightening around some of his inner circle, like you say, this Timur Mindic and Herman Halushenko, who's the former energy minister, I think now former justice minister. He was the justice minister.
This is the guy. This is the law and order guy.
This is the nature of the regime that exists, and some of the details of this scandal are bound to. And this is only the latest corruption scandal. I mean, there's been so much corruption unearthed. Bribes paid to recruitment officers, all sorts of corruption scandals we can maybe go into. But this one in particular, I think, will hurt, for a lot of Ukrainians. Yeah. Because the war's going extremely badly. And we'll come on to that, of course. Yeah. But right now, the Russians are absolutely pummeling the Ukrainian cities from the sky. And you're talking in some areas of 16-hour blackouts as we're approaching winter. The energy sector is in disarray. And a lot of these scandals actually surround precisely kickbacks in the energy sector. There's $100 million of kickbacks and all of this sort of stuff.
Well, I mean, this scheme, let's explain the scheme. The scheme has been, they had this thing called the barrier of entry for contractors who were working for the energy sector. And in particular, what this is about contractors hired to build fortifications for energy facilities. So measures to protect them from Russian attacks. And they've been demanding between 10 and 15% of any contract. So in order to get a contract with the Energoatom, which is the main nuclear energy company, you've had to pay 10 or 15% of the contract you sign. In fact, on the 10th of October, Volodymyr Zelensky called a meeting to discuss the extreme dire nature of the energy facilities and the energy grid, asking for measures to be taken. I read the report of that meeting, and no one knew exactly what was going on. Oh yeah, we are building fortifications, we are building defenses, we're not doing, we're trying to take measures. While that meeting was going on, or at least on the same day, I don't know if it was at the same time, but on the same day, the wiretaps reveal a conversation between Mindich and his associates where they agreed to up the kickback from 10 to 15%. So while the country is descending deeper into chaos and desperation, these guys are deciding to steal more money.
Yeah, no,
basically.
Exactly. And I mean, we talked about this air offensive over the course of the past few weeks that Russia has been absolutely bombarding Ukrainian cities. And when this happens, I mean, several of the bombs dropped in on the substations on nuclear power facilities. And whenever this happens, you hear the Ukrainian government coming out with statements, the Russians are playing with nuclear catastrophe and so on and so forth. These people have been playing with nuclear catastrophe when they've basically turned the question of defending these nuclear sites into a racket, basically, to make enormous amounts of profit. So the highest degree of cynicism.
And just to say, the people involved in this case, Timur Mindich is the co-owner of Quartal 95, which is the company, the movie production company that he owns with Zelensky. He owns a luxury flat, which has a golden toilet in it.
Toilet, very nice.
This is where Zelensky had his 30th birthday. By the way, during COVID, where you weren't allowed to mingle, and this place was called the shadow office of the president, because this is where you had all the major deals made. The Nabu and Sapo have not revealed all of their tapes, but it's believed that Zelensky is also on these tapes, because they believe that this flat was safe from wiretaps. Now, as it happens, there was an oligarch who lived upstairs. Timur Mindich, by some accident, flooded his apartment, and as it was being repaired, Nabu and Sapu installed their wiretaps in there. So that's where they got it. Anyway, he was kind of the handler. He was the guy at the center of everything. He was the guy with the connections into government and into business. But there were others. There was the then Minister of Energy, now Minister of Justice, Herman Halushenko. By the way, Mindich's code name was Carlson. That's what they called themselves. Just goes to show it doesn't matter if you use code names or not. People are gonna figure you out anyway. Herman Halushenko, the professor, and his I'm not sure if it's his wife or a what's it called, secret lover, Svetlana Hrinchuk, who is the energy minister, who was also involved in all of these conversations and who's now been suspended. Although no, these two ministers, these are ministers of the cabinet, of the inner circle, right? They're not in prison. They've just been suspended, pending investigations. Igor Moronuk, former deputy head of state of the State Property Fund, and the advisor to the energy minister. His codename was Rocket. Dmitro Bazov, formerly a prosecutor, now Energoatom's security director. The Zuckerman brothers, who seem to be businessmen, by the way, they are linked to this former casting company, which is now a big-time weapons producer, Firepoint, which is also another scandal about Mindich and this company. They got $1 billion worth of drone contracts. Alexei Chernyshov, codenamed Che Guevara, the former vice prime minister. Apparently, he's now saying, "Well, if I'm going down, I'm gonna take." He's under arrest. Minchik, where's the guy? Mindich has escaped the country. No one knows where he is. They just say he's left the country. Apparently, by a tip from someone from Nabu.
Yeah, from within Nabu, of course.
From within Nabu. The former vice prime minister, Chernyshov, who's been arrested, he's saying, "Well, if I'm going down, I'm going to take everyone down with me." He said he's going to turn everyone over. This is the whole of the inner circle of the government. Minister of Energy, Minister of Justice. We know the Minister of Defense has been involved in several, the former ones at least have had several scandals around them as well. So this goes right to the heart of the whole thing. There's also other scandals that Mindich has been involved in. One, a company owned by Mindich and Zelensky has been, or I'm not sure if this is kind of murky, but it's related to Zelensky. There's like a link to Zelensky as well here. There's a kind of paper trail to Zelensky. Took on a huge amount of contracts for building fortifications, dragon teeth, anti-tank ditches to defend Ukrainian cities, which were never built. So again, money has gone out. He's been involved to a scandal around this company Firepoint, which was a casting agency before the war. Now it's the biggest drone and missile producer in Ukraine. They're building the Flamingo missile, which apparently is not very good. Their drones are not very good compared to their competitors. But they got $1 billion worth of contracts. And a whole series of other things in all the major scandals of the past few years. Oh, yes. Drone procurement, arms procurement, where people have been asked to pay 30% of an arms contract in order to get the contract for the state. So they're allowed to kind of say, give you an overpriced contract, but then they have to pay 30% of what they earn to people like Mindich and others as well. This is obviously, this is nothing new, but now there's faces and names and proof to it, and it goes right all the way up to the top. And it happens in this context, as you write, as you said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I think a thing to bear in mind is this is, in many respects, not something new for Ukrainian politics. I mean, this is actually the second golden toilet, I think, in Ukrainian politics.
The first one led to the Maidan
movement, which there was an anti-corruption. You know, the opponents of Yanukovych, I think, was the president at that time, were very much used this question of hatred of the corruption and rottenness of that wing of the oligarchy which Yanukovych represented. And of course, they used that to install themselves with the backing of the West, of course. And of course, the West is also backing, NABU and SAPO, these agencies that have been carrying out these investigations. They're very much linked to the West and the Europeans in particular. But yeah, through using this question of corruption and so forth, they that was very much a part of the Maidan movement. And Yanukovych himself also had a golden toilet. So this isn't something new in fact,
Zelensky was elected in 2019 because people had enough with corruption, with the corruption of the Maidan regime.
Of that regime.
So first you had Yanukovych, who's corruption. Obviously, there was lots of corruption. Then you had. And this goes way back to the 90s, by the way.
Yeah.
There's always been this corruption at the top. Then you had this so-called Maidan revolution.
Yeah.
The Maidan so-called revolution.
Yeah.
Like that. It was a movement.
And then people like Poroshenko in power,
and then Poroshenko, who's now behind this. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
But, and then Zelensky was elected against all of this crap. And he came up saying, I'm clean. In fact, he played a role in a movie.
Yeah.
which was about a comedian becoming a president
Yeah.
and going against corruption.
Yeah, rooting out corruption. Yeah,
And now he's
look
right
him.
at the center of it. And what's clear in all of this is that Zelensky knew all of it. I mean, there's not yet. Zelensky's name has been mentioned in one of the things that's been leaked. But obviously, this is not. I was reading Kiev Independent, which is obviously a very, very staunch supporter of the regime there. And they were like, oh, Zelensky made a mistake about the people that he hangs out with. He was just inexperienced. He didn't know. He's involved in all of this.
Yeah,
Of course he is. And there's a lot of scandals, in fact, involving him and his wife and his companies. This is his business partner. This is where he has his... And people call them Mindich, Zelensky's confidant. They were close friends. Of course he knew. This was his cabinet. That the core members of his cabinet, people who have not been changed over the many waves of firing of ministers and so on. And obviously this happens at the time, as you say, where the Russian aerial offensive is really gaining ground. Russia's producing more drones than ever before, and we see raids of up to 1,000 drones and missiles. There's someone was saying in I can't remember where I read this, but it's more and more clear that there's actual Russian engineers sitting figuring out how to strike the Ukrainian energy facilities to have the maximum effect. So there's a general campaign of undermining the energy grid, and then this is what they're doing. And as you say, 16 hours without heat, without electricity, that means death for some people.
Yeah, many people.
I can imagine a lot of people would be seething with anger. But there's another side to this, which is Pokrovsk. I mean, we've reported this many times. The Russians have been advancing at an ever-increasing rate, and they're taking on bigger and bigger challenges. At the moment, they have taken almost all of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region. They are storming or preparing to storm Liman, a key city just east of Slavyansk. They are storming Siversk, another key city east of Slavyansk. They're storming Konstantinivka, which is one of the major cities of the Donetsk region. And they have taken almost the entirety of Pokrovsk. They've surrounded the sister city of Pokrovsk, which is Midnograd. This is the biggest urban area that the Russians have taken on. And by the way, they are also advancing very quickly in the Zaporizhia region. They've, in the past 2 days or 3 days, they've advanced massively against the city of Ulyapolye, and there's now panic because they're just wading through these villages and fields more or less unopposed. But last week, or perhaps it was 2 weeks ago, Zelensky came out with a statement saying that, no, nothing is going on in Pokrovsk. There's only 240 people there. And there's only 240 Russians there, and only 60 Russians in Kupiansk, and we're just mopping it up, and we're just getting rid of them. And everyone who follows this war can see that's not true.
No,
that the Russians have taken the whole of Pokrovsk. So what's behind this?
Yeah, I mean, what's behind this? I mean, first of all, I would say that the timing of this crisis that Zelensky's facing, with the anti-corruption probe and the crisis on the battlefield, which is what's driving everything. I think that the timing is not coincidental. I think it's quite clear that, I mean, as we say, this corruption, it goes back to, it goes back to 1991. It goes back to the restoration of capitalism in Ukraine, which has led to it being dominated by these oligarchs, different factions, and so forth. All that has happened is that the West, which has used Ukraine in this proxy war, has poured hundreds of billions of dollars, euros, and so on. And that's like pouring petrol onto the fire of corruption. It's turned it into an enormous cash cow. And huge amounts of careers are connected now. And not just careers, of course. Huge amounts of money off the top is connected to the continuation of this war. If this war ends, if the money stops flowing from Europe, from the Americans, then there's even though Ukraine itself is going bankrupt, a lot of people within Ukraine, the oligarchy, are making enormous amounts of money. As this crisis is developing in the battlefield, splits, I think, are developing also within the regime. I mean, the SAPO and NABU, these two anti-corruption agencies, they're not just acting on benevolence themselves. They themselves, like you say, they have the backing of a section of the oligarchy. They have a section of the group of oligarchs. People like Poroshenko, the Klitschko brothers, and so forth are very much connected. So there's this struggle is taking place now. Precisely because the crisis is deepening, and it looks like Zelensky's days are probably numbered. So the situation on the battlefield, I think, is the key thing. The fact of the matter is that the war is being lost, and Zelensky's burying his head in the sand. Or is he burying his head in the sand? He's telling a pack of lies about the whole thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the question I think that needs to be answered is, why is he lying? Because it's an obvious lie. And most people in Ukraine would also see it as such. And I think that it's clear. Zelensky has built his power, and the whole of the Ukrainian regime today is built on this war and built on being a puppet of Western imperialism. It's built on being a proxy, in other words. It's not just the military-industrial complex. That is a big, by the way, a big incentive. Because we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars which are flowing into this country, but it's the whole of the regime. This whole reason for existence is this war, and it's clear that they're losing. They are losing. They are recruiting less people than they are losing. Amount of desertions are peaking. You have in October, you had 20,000 cases of missing in action. In other words, basically desertions. They say that most people who come to the front is after their first kind of stint in some trench, just run away.
Also because they can't. Then there's no rotations because there's a lack of manpower. So the only way you get a break is by going AWOL.
Yeah,
and some people then re-enlist. Actually, they just needed a bit of a reprieve from the front.
But there are more and more people who just run away because it's a one-way ticket. Yeah. And it's a war that's lost.
Yeah.
So why do you keep fighting a war that's lost? It's clear that there are other interests at stake because they know that once they take a step back, they are also gone. So they built their own whole reason for existence on this war, and therefore they needed to keep going. It's not just about corruption. It's the whole system, it's the whole regime that needs the war, and it needs to feed the West the idea that we're winning and we're fighting back. That's the one thing. But there's another thing. Because they're doing that, they are refusing to withdraw from any position. Now, in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, which is the two kind of sister cities that have now been encircled and partially taken, you've had thousands of people, thousands of soldiers, up to 10,000 soldiers to begin with, probably, maybe even more. And added to that, a whole series of special forces that were added there as the Russians were getting closer. They were sent there to defend it. They were saying, we need to withdraw. We can't defend this, right? And we're just being destroyed. This is what happened in Bakhmut. This is what happened in Ugledar. This is what happened in so many places. And Zelensky's position, because this war is fought as a PR war, public relations war, which is something you sell to the West to get their support. That is how this war is fought. The lives on the ground are expendable for these people. And so this is what they've been doing. They've been defending an undefendable position, leading to thousands of deaths, unnecessary deaths, prolonging a war far beyond. After it's clear that it's been lost, in effect, keep prolonging it. Why? And then here people can see black on white what they've been doing in the meantime. You know, they talk about, Zelensky talks about bravery and sacrifice and defending the nation, but all the while they've just been enriching themselves. And I think this will, I'm sure it is having a huge impact. If there wasn't demoralization before, I mean, 20,000 for 1 month of people going AWOL, that's a lot. You have 300,000 cases this year alone, I think. and it's just increasing now.
Yeah.
People are sounding the alarm. This guy Tatarigami, who's he's on Twitter, is a Ukrainian pro-Ukrainian officer. He's an officer in the Ukraine. He's saying this is now we now have a desperate situation, and we need to take extremely harsh measures to stop the desertions. Essentially, proper imprisonment and death sentence and these kind of things. But it's not going to help. And then people see this.
Yeah. No, I think it's quite clear that they know what's going on, but they have to spin a certain story for the particularly for Western consumption. I think people in Ukraine know what's going on.
It's cynical.
It's extremely cynical. It's extremely cynical. I mean, you talk about the collapse in morale. At the outbreak of the war, 70% of people in Ukraine wanted to continue this up until victory over the Russians. Now it's down to 24%.
Yeah.
The majority of people think it's necessary to negotiate, that effectively they can see that the war is lost.
Yeah.
Every day there's websites that publish videos of people just being kidnapped off the streets, basically to fill to plug the hole of in recruitment and send them to their certain deaths at the front lines. And there was even one incident, I think, like a week ago, where one of these buses, they call it bussification. People are literally being kidnapped, thrown into buses. One of them was overturned by an angry crowd, but in Odessa. So they know what's going on, but they're the situation, the mood is turning, and what they're doing is they're basically they're running a PR war at the expense of just throwing people into a meat grinder. There was a video which Zelensky or Sersky, the chief of staff, they published this video of it was very much like spy 007 style of a helicopter landing in Pokrovsk and Ukrainian special agents getting out, and they hailed this. This is a real victory, real bravery on the part of the Russians. Then released the video. These 10 men got out of this helicopter that had landed in Pokrovsk, immediately shot dead or hit by drones.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. It's just a piece of PR.
Yeah.
And they've been selling this story. No, we're winning the Battle of Pokrovsk. And the Western media is repeating the same story. You read the Western media, they say
crazy.
They just report what Zelensky says, what Zersky says, what some other people in the Ukrainian military are saying.
I have to say, I'm just going to interject here because it's a funny story. I mean, tragic, but also comic. They talk about, they say, oh, there's only 240 people in Pokrovsk. And then a few days ago, Sirsky comes out. Sirsky is the commander-in-chief, the highest ranking officer. And he says, oh no, there's now 313. Then I was listening to The Telegraph. The Telegraph has a daily update on Ukraine, which is terrible, by the way, but they give something. They say a few things. And they said, what happened was that a fog came. And then we have this video of, just Russians in big columns just marching and driving into Pokrovsk. But if it was just so now this is how they square the circle, how the 240 Russians became the occupation of the whole city. But in reality, it was because they as you said, they were just they was just seeing those people as expendable. They were fighting a PR war, and they're just lying through their teeth.
Yes, and one of the consequences of that is that the situation is, I mean, they should have withdrawn weeks ago, and they might have been able to withdraw their troops. They would have lost Pokrovsk.
Yeah.
But now you have a situation where that's impossible. Even the most optimistic estimates are saying there's like a 5 kilometer. The Ukrainians themselves say there's a little 5 kilometer hole that they might be able to escape through. That's running over open fields with Russian drones overhead. They're completely trapped now.
Yeah.
The Russians are saying 5,000 Ukrainian troops in Pokrovsk, more in Kupiansk. So in actual fact, it's leading to greater disasters. I mean, they've been pushing this in order to keep the war going, in order to keep the West on side, particularly trying to put pressure on Trump. And you have this, you have particularly in Europe, the media in the West is playing along with this game. They know what's happening. They a few days later they have to say, oh, suddenly there's a fog. But they knew what they were doing from the. In fact, not Putin, the Russians invited Western journalists to come to Pokrovsk.
Yeah.
None of them took up that opportunity because the way they see it is as they see that there's an existential threat to European imperialism by the breakdown potentially of the transatlantic alliance. They're very worried about Trump. They want to apply this pressure. So they're reporting verbatim, without any, without any caveats, exactly what the Ukrainians, our unbiased, objective Western press are relating this exactly what, in an uncritical way, what the Ukrainians are saying, in order precisely to continue drumming up public opinion for continuing this war indefinitely, because for their own particular interests.
This was supposed to be the regime that fought for democracy on behalf of Europe. Right?
Here we have the real picture.
Here you see what the real situation is.
Yeah.
As you say, the Europeans are equally cynical because they also see the Ukrainian people as and the Ukrainian nation as expendable. They're using Ukraine as a means to try to weaken Russia, and they're using Ukraine now in a cynical attempt to tie America down into Europe. Trump has said he's going to withdraw troops from Europe. In general, he's withdrawing, kind of sucking out his economic interests in Europe, trying to move production and so on into Europe. He's moving away from the old open market system of American and European collaboration. That's a major threat to the European capitalist class, the rich, the big businesses, and therefore there is a campaign to tie America down.
Yeah, right? And they say though that they are in favor of peace. They're in favor of a ceasefire.
Yeah,
this is what the Europeans say. Yeah. Whereas Trump wants a peace on Russia's terms. We're in favor of a ceasefire. They're not in favor of peace whatsoever. The Europeans, these liberal, democratic, wonderful Europeans. What they mean by an immediate ceasefire is they set a ceasefire. Then we send NATO peacekeepers in. Eventually, that ceasefire inevitably breaks down without addressing any of the Russians' concerns. Yeah. And the Europeans, the Americans, are forced increasingly to into the action. That's what they're actually arguing in favor of.
But now Trump has, for all intents and purposes, withdrawn financially. At least,
yes,
he's still supporting it. Weapons, in fact, in some ways, he's been more implicated in the war since he started putting sanctions on Russia and people buying Russian oil. But the Europeans are now stuck with the bill. And the story is, the fact is that at least $120 billion, that is the shortfall in the Ukrainian budget for next year. I don't know how much that would be if there weren't any graft, but it's a lot of money, and they are now stuck as to where this money should come from. The Americans have said we're not going to pay it.
Yeah,
and I think Trump will have a hard time finding money for that. I mean, he might do it, but he's going to become very unpopular. They said first, we should take a loan in the frozen Russian assets in Belgium. Yes, which amounts to theft because
which Russian they've acknowledged. Yeah, they've acknowledged this effectively. There's 140 billion euros of Russian assets frozen in a Belgian company, I believe.
It's a thing called Euroclear. Yeah,
Euroclear. Okay, it's maybe a French-Belgian company. Anyway,
it's a part of the ECB, as far as I understand.
Is it? Okay, all right. Well, they're now fighting like cats in a bag, basically, over the question of they couldn't expropriate this directly because that is theft, and that is
too open.
Too open, and they're not worried about seizing Russian assets as such, but they're worried about other countries. You're not going to invest in Europe if they're just going to, as soon as they politically fall out with you, they seize your assets. So they didn't want to. So they tried a legal workaround basically to make this technically not theft. They would basically give a 140 billion euro loan to the Ukrainians, which would be guaranteed.
Ukrainians would never pay back.
Which would never be paid back, of course. But it'd be guaranteed by reparations that would be paid by Russia when we win this war, when we take back everything,
and
including Crimea.
That money is in Euroclear.
Yeah, and that money is in Euroclear. So it would be taking it, but on the assumption that they will beat Russia in this war and will get reparations, which is obviously never going to happen. So it's de facto, it's theft. And then the Belgians objected, hang on a minute, we're kind of implicated. This money sort of sat here. If we seize this money, are you going to have joint liability with us if this comes up to legal challenge? And then the other European countries, no, hang on a minute, we're not going to accept this liability. They don't want to share responsibility. Because they know it's illegal. Because they know
they
that
insist on saying that Belgium should take it.
Yeah, despite this legal fiction.
But look, first of all, it is theft.
Yeah.
If you own a house and I come and go to the bank and say, I want to take a loan in his house, and I'm not going to pay the money back. That is theft. That is exactly. That is the definition of theft.
Well, yeah, it's many crimes, I think.
But but then they're concocting all sorts of other schemes of how to
Yeah.
get this money. They asked the Norwegian National Trust to guarantee this debt, which the Norwegians
The
also
biggest
said,
wealth
no,
fund in
thank
the
you very
world.
much. No, thank you, but thank you, no, thank you.
Yes.
But they're actually now discussing taking up Eurobond, issuing loans on behalf of the EU itself, which is a continent mired in public debt
Yes.
that is now costing, we get to that in Britain.
Yes.
It's a continent mired in debt, which is leading to severe attacks on the welfare state, severe attacks on social benefits, on the working class in general. We saw in France, they need to pass, 50 billion euros worth of cuts. And it won't even cover the actual interest rate payment. So this is a continent mired in debt, and they want to take up 120 which would last Ukraine a year.
Yes.
Right? Which is just extended for another year.
Yes, extend the
And the people who have to pay for this, the European workers.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's look at the cynicism and if we lay this out, you have in Ukraine a regime which is just sucking blood out of the backs of the Ukrainian people, using this war to enrich themselves and to support their own plans and schemes and so on. In Europe, you have the Europeans, again, extremely narrow and short-sighted not the European people, the European rich, the European big businesses, the European capitalists and state bureaucracies and so on. In their desperate attempt to fight off Russia, which is now becoming the biggest, strongest force in Eastern Europe.
Yes.
Military-wise at least, and to tie down America into in Europe, they're willing to drag out this war as well, killing off, making sure that the loads of Ukrainians are dying, and the whole of the Ukrainian nation, by the way, being destroyed. They say that the energy facilities, just until a few weeks ago, it would take 10 years to repair them back to normal standards. Obviously, it's only going to get worse. So the whole of the country is descending into a very desperate situation, and the Ukrainians are pushing for this, and they're putting the bill at the doorsteps of the European working class. So it's the workers in Ukraine and in Europe who are paying for this. By the way, the workers in Europe are already paying for the end of the sanctions on Russian gas, the end of the gas deal with Russia, which means that we're paying extremely high prices for electricity, for heating. Inflation in general has gone up. Food, ordinary consumer items. It's the workers who are paying for this, for the extremely narrow and short-sighted schemes of the ruling class.
Yeah, and there's going to be a political price to pay, I think, for the ruling class of Europe, and they're already starting to pay for it. I mean, they split and divided about how they go ahead with this question of continuing this forever war in Ukraine, trying to push it further and further. How are they going to pay for it? Well, like you say, this question of Eurobonds has come up. The French and the Italians are quite happy with that because Eurobonds means Germany pays for it. The Germans aren't necessarily that happy about that. Belgium, of course, isn't very happy about taking on that liability. French debt budget deficit is about 5.5% of GDP, enormous budget deficit. But Belgium is 4.5% of GDP. They had a general strike against, the austerity measures that were being introduced by their government. You look at the coalition of the willing, Macron, he's, I think, 11% approval rating, something like that. I don't know. But it's certainly extremely low approval ratings and lurching from one crisis after another.
The coalition of the willing, by
Starmer,
the way, is a coalition of
so-called
brave fighters for Ukraine.
Great war heroes.
The brave people who are willing to let the Ukrainians fight and bleed for them and for the European working class to pay the price as well.
Yeah.
Pay the bill. Yeah.
And they're all hated back home. And precisely, banging the drum of war and using that to remilitarize at the same time that they're carrying out massive austerity attacks upon the working class.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's go to the heart of the coalition of the willing. Great Britannia, who used to rule the waves. We have I think, well, I mean, it ties in pretty neatly, actually, to the whole situation. There's a how do you say, political bombshell was revealed a few days ago when we saw these claims that there's a leadership challenge inside of the Labour Party. Wes Streeting, who's the health
secretary, I think.
health secretary, is supposedly gunning for Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, and there was a hashtag trending on Twitter, which is called number 10. The Traitors number 10 or something like
quite
that.
Appropriate, yeah.
if people don't know, The Traitors is this TV show which is all about backstabbing and lying and cheating and So what's happening?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think anyone knows what's happening. I mean, you talked about at the start of this program, the real decisions under capitalism are made behind closed doors. Well, something weird is going on behind the closed doors of number 10, the Prime Minister's office in Britain. Because it seems that this government brought this crisis on themselves. No one had been talking, at least in the public sphere, no one in the media had been talking about a leadership challenge to Starmer. It's clear that his approval ratings are, he's the most unpopular prime minister in British history, I think, right now.
Yeah.
He's only 16 months into it's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were questions, but there was no direct candidate or anything like that, anyone being posed as potentially there to sort of carry out a coup or a leadership challenge. And then they came out with a briefing from someone inside number 10. If there's any challenge to Starmer, he's willing to fight it out, and he's you know, this fighting talk. And suddenly now there is speculation, and of course all of the attention was on Wes Streeting, the health secretary, who came out quite cleverly. No doubt he undoubtedly has these intentions, and said, "Oh no, I'm not doing this. This is." And then starts pointing the finger at the atmosphere inside number 10. Apparently, according to, there was one Spectator article, even Starmer himself didn't, this came as a bolt from the blue. Someone inside number 10, however, has accused Wes Streeting openly and publicly of conspiring against the government. Yeah. And the whole thing is extremely strange, and just has this sense that there is an atmosphere of paranoia and crisis at the very top of the government. And undoubtedly, the knives are out because, the Labour Party is staring down a disaster, a catastrophic situation. We can come on to maybe, I mean, their approval ratings and so forth. But
I mean, as you said, I don't know if it's the most unpopular leader in history. Probably true. I haven't seen that anywhere, but it's massive unpopular. One poll I saw, this is from last month, and it's gotten worse since then. 67% were unfavorable towards Starmer. 22% had a favorable view. So what's that? That's 45% in the dark, right? In the red. And then there's the opinion polls. What's the latest?
It's quite remarkable. Right now, there's one opinion poll from Find Out Now, I think, is the group which polled, I think, 2,000, maybe 2,500 people. And they found that 33% of people intend to vote for Reform. That is Reform UK, Nigel Farage's party. 18% in second, the Green Party. So we're looking at a Reform government with Green Party opposition, which has shifted, obviously, much lurched to the left under Zach Polanski, the new leader, is on 18%.
Yeah.
And then the Conservatives on 16% and Labour in fourth place on 15%. So in 16 months, they've gone from what was hailed as a big landslide, a big majority, to being fourth place. And the two main parties that have dominated British capitalism, that have been the two main representatives of British capitalism in this duopoly for a century, have been absolutely devastated. I've got a figure here, just shows how much of a landslide, how historic this is. If you take a step back, how dominant the Labour Party and the Tory Party have been in British politics. If you go back to 1951, they got 96.8% of the vote combined.
Yeah.
Last year was a record low in terms of their combined vote. It was 57.4% in the election last year. 16 months later, it's down to 31%, and that's in a tiny amount of time.
Not only that,
Collapse.
31%, and Reform is now
33.
polling higher than both of the traditional parties of
Combined,
British capitalism combined.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And on top of this, now, of course, you have the budget is in preparation. Rachel Reeves is preparing the budget. And there is a £30 billion black hole has suddenly appeared in the British budget, which means they're going to have to break all their electoral promises. All the promises about not raising taxes, all the promises about protecting services are going to go out the window. This is going to be a massive austerity budget and a massive attack on the working class. So there's panic. There's panic in the upper echelons of the Labour Party. I had quotes by ministers. I can't find any of them though, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, I mean, what this really reveals is the same process we see everywhere. It's the same process we see in the US, for that sake, with the total discreditation of the traditional political system. I mean, in the US, we saw Donald Trump. Why did he win? Because he wasn't really seen as a Republican.
Yeah.
I mean, now he's back into the fold, so to say. He's joining ranks, being pulled into the ranks again. But he wasn't really seen as a Republican. He wasn't seen as an outsider. He openly attacked, in fact, the Republican Party. And then you have people like Zoran Mamdani in New York, who won. A big reason of his victory was that he wasn't seen as a traditional Democrat. In fact, his whole campaign in the run-up, in the primaries, and also in the run-up for the mayoral election itself, he was presenting himself as being opposed to the traditional Democratic Party establishment. So that's something we see everywhere. We see in France, you have Le Pen rising on one side and Mélenchon on the other. And what this really represents is there's a mood of rebellion, isn't there? It's not, as people say, oh, Trump was elected, it's fascism. No. There's a mood of rebellion. And people are looking for a radical way out. And the Labour Party, during Corbyn, it was actually seen for a split second, it was seen as an alternative. When Corbyn took over the leadership of the party, he criticized the ruling class. He called for nationalization of the utilities and so on and so forth, nationalization of transports. He had a huge echo. And the Labour Party grew to 600,000 members, the biggest party in Europe at the time. And but after these guys took over, obviously, the main reason for the coup against Corbyn was for the ruling class to reestablish control over the party. Yes. This is a party that's seen by the working class as traditionally theirs, but whose leadership has, for decades at least, well, forever almost, been controlled by the ruling class. It was a safe they needed a safe set of hands in the form of Keir Starmer. But at the same time, the policies that a safe pair of hands can guarantee
not very popular.
are not very popular, because what is it that the system needs? Yeah. The system needs to balance the books. I've been reading Financial Times, they've been writing a lot about this question of the budget deficit. They're putting a lot of pressure that Labour must break their election promises. Which was not to raise taxes, right? I think it was Martin Wolf who wrote an editorial saying British productivity is tanking.
Yeah.
It's been stagnant for decades, basically. And in order to raise it, Labour needs to break their promises. What does that mean to you? How do you hear that?
Yeah, well, I think it means, first of all, that there's whatever Wes Streeting might or might not be doing, I don't think the ruling class are very happy, because the public might not like Starmer, but from the point of view of the ruling class, he's the closest thing they've got. He's more reliable than they don't want any left populism, right populism. They see that he's got He's the best pair of hands they've got, basically. But he's in a very difficult position. He's in an impossible position, basically, because, like you say, this is the policy the ruling class are demanding. But if you demand that, you're committing political suicide.
Yeah.
And we've seen this now. Actually, they've tried to actually carry out some of the policy that the ruling class are demanding when they attacked personal independence payments for the disabled last was it last spring, yeah. And then there was the winter fuel cuts for attacking pensioners, the disabled. There was a massive backlash, huge anger, and that was reflected in the Parliamentary Labour Party, because these people, they got careers to defend, you know. They're not thinking just about the interests of the ruling class.
The FT is saying, look, these are necessary measures. Labour will have to go back, and disability is a lot of money. And what we need to give is to give incentives for people to work. Now, I know from friends and comrades who deal with this system that it's not a question of not wanting to work. In fact, it is incredibly difficult to get disability benefits in this country. You have to jump through so many hoops that most people who are disabled, if they don't have a lot of people, very, very well-resourced people helping them, it would be almost impossible for them to get it. So to say that's what the bourgeois are saying, right? Basically, put the squeeze in. While at the same time, they go to Ukraine and offer undying support. 100 years. 100 years of support is the deal they made with the Ukrainians. For 100 years, they're going to give them, what is it, 3 billion?
3 billion a year or something like that, yeah.
I'm not sure if those two are related, but they are giving them 3 billion a year, and they propose to support them for. They give them a lot more than that, actually, while they attack the pensioners and the disabled here. And then they say, oh, the problem is productivity, which is true in the sense that they haven't made any investments. Britain is the country in the OECD, as far as I understand, with the lowest amount of investments in the real economy. So productivity is declining. That's true. If you don't invest in machinery and technology, in upgrading your systems, in upgrading the infrastructure, modernizing society, and everyone who comes here from a third world country for the first time will be pretty shocked that this is not too far from that situation, in some areas at least. And then they say, oh yeah, instead of actually investing in productive kind of means and measures, people should just work harder. Ordinary people should pay more in taxes.
Yeah.
Disabled people and pensioners should give up something. These are the two big, the big posts in the budget. But we can't touch the businesses, none of that, because then obviously they're not gonna have an incentive to stay.
Incentive to invest, yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And when I think we can come on to some of this, when the government is asking, oh, well, we're going to be the government of people that work hard and so forth, and we shouldn't have scrounging and this sort of thing. And if people can pay, we need to if people can work, then we need to incentivize them to work. And that translates into cutting benefits for personal independence payments for people that can't wash themselves below the waist. It's the most cruel and the most egregious attacks on the poorest, the most vulnerable, and on the working class. And then what do they see when they see the representatives of this government? And this is something that we see all over the world, is they see that these people, as soon as, I think within weeks of Starmer getting elected, he accepted VIP football tickets to his favorite football club. The pettiest levels of corruption and graft. Angela Rayner is the latest one, I think, to fall into one of these crises. No, she's not the latest one, actually. Rachel Reeves is. She didn't get the proper license for renting out her flat or her family home, which she's taken in £3,500 a month. Now, it's £3,500 a month is not that much on the scale of some of the corruption scandals, but for an ordinary person, that's a huge amount of money. And she broke the law. Yeah. What would happen to an ordinary person if they didn't fill in the correct form for their benefits, like you say, personal independence payment? If they haven't got the support to tick the right boxes, you're getting sanctioned. And, you can't turn on the heating. well, that's your problem. You can't eat. Well, go to a food bank.
Yeah.
That's what ordinary people are told.
Yeah.
And then someone like Rachel Reeves can get away with this. Angela Rayner just had to resign recently over the question of the fact that her second house and failure to pay tax, I think.
Didn't pay tax on her second house.
On her second house. Ordinary people, most people don't have, they'd be lucky to have a first house, let alone a second house.
Yeah.
So sometimes it may seem a little bit strange. How can, it's like, of all of the crimes that they commit and all of the egregious things that they carry out, then it's something like this that brings down, Angela Rayner or that thrusts the government into crisis, these scandals, which have been coming thick and fast. You can add on to that the resignation of Peter Mandelson, over his connections to Epstein.
Peter Mandelson was
Peter Mandelson, sorry, yeah, he was the US, the ambassador to the US.
Yes. Which is supposed to be the fixer, the one who's going to fix the British government. He was the trusted...
Yeah.
He was a trusted set of hands to fix Britain's relationship with Trump.
Because he's well connected to the rich and powerful over in America. Clearly too well connected in the end. But yeah, what sticks in people's throats most sometimes is actually the small scandals, the sense of impunity that they can get away with these things. Yeah, that can be the thing that provokes disgust and the greatest disgust and anger.
There's also Prince Andrew.
Well, yeah, talking about not such small scandals, but actually an enormous scandal here. It's like every pillar of the British establishment is in crisis at the moment. From the Labour Party with this low-level sleaze and corruption and rottenness, the monarchy we'll come on to, the BBC's now. The Director General's had to resign, and crisis there in the police, the racism and misogyny and these sort of things that are coming out. But yeah,
it's funny about the BBC because what's happened with the BBC is that there's been an article there's been an article
in the Telegraph, wasn't it?
by one of the I'm not sure if it was a now editor or former editor of the Telegraph, who is also on the board of the BBC, who's written a long list of areas where the BBC is misrepresenting or underreporting. He's a right winger, by the way. He thinks that it's too left wing. He thinks that BBC is too left wing. But one of the clips that he highlights is a Panorama documentary where they had clearly doctored Trump's speeches to appear like he was calling for the January 6th insurrection, or the so-called insurrection.
Yeah.
And that the Proud Boys, this white supremacist organization, they were heeding his call, and he was directly calling for this. Whereas the statements were wildly apart from each other in time and space and in totally different contexts. So it's clear that they doctored it. It was absolutely clear.
Yes.
And I think for a lot of people, if they didn't really realize it, but it's completely undermined the trust in this so-called public service TV station, but a broadcaster. But this is not something this is just one part of the population who's perhaps waking up to this. But if you look at the way that they've covered the Ukraine war, for example.
Yeah.
I don't have the latest, but I'm sure that they've been saying that Pokrovsk is not fallen. They've just been echoing propaganda. The Russian missiles. Oh, the Russians are running out of missiles. They've been running out of missiles for
3 years.
3 years now. Any minute it's gonna come. The lie that we have a democratic regime and completely ignoring the fact that the how do you say involvement of far right nationalists and the whole Nazi, semi-Nazi ideology which runs through big parts of the Ukrainian state. The reasons for the war, which is the fact that it was the West that provoked this war. All of this, obviously, they've been lying about Gaza. There was a report over the summer investigating 32,000 pieces, news clips, articles and video clips, and analyzing how they viewed things, which is completely skewed from every point of view. The way that they talked about it, always sowing doubt about the Palestinian figures, presenting the Israeli figures and statements as pure fact. They said you had 32 times more, 64,000 people dying on the Palestinian side, and 2,000 people dying on the Israeli side, but they were presented equally. They were given equal time, so as to present the two sides as equal, completely ignoring the fact that this was a one-sided civil war. Sorry, not war.
Genocide.
Genocide against the people of Gaza. So, but all of this just adds to the general picture that people don't trust the politicians. People don't trust the media. People don't trust the establishment as a whole. We've seen this corruption has been a big element. It's been a big thing in these Gen Z revolutions in Indonesia, in Nepal, in
Madagascar.
In Madagascar, there's been a lot of anti-corruption movements, and there's this rage against this. Yeah, as you say, this sense of impunity, the arrogance of the rich, the arrogance of the politicians, and how they carry themselves, and just walk around like no one can hurt them, like they're untouchables and doing whatever they please. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, that there is this enormous distrust and anger towards every pillar of the establishment. I think. I mean, this BBC thing. There is a right wing in Britain, and it's very similar to the United States, that sees themselves as they're outsiders from the establishment, and they see this establishment, this liberal ruling class, as very exclusive, and they want in on it. People like Farage, they want to push them, but in doing so, in pushing themselves forward, they're prepared to rest upon that enormous anger, which is genuine anti-establishment anger, and a feeling in working class communities that they're left behind, that their industries have been allowed to collapse, that their services are collapsing. That they have no future, that they can't afford to eat or to turn on and that there's an elite. They might not be able to put a clear name on it. They might not call it the capitalist class. They might not be able to see that, but there's an elite, and they're not part of it, and they're not welcome in it. And of course, these demagogues are able to rest upon that. And the Labour Party and the Tories, the establishment, they feel bewildered that people like Farage can come out of nowhere. Well, he's not coming out of nowhere. He's an expression of this enormous anger. And then they attack the BBC, and they tap into this sense that, they do lie to us, Well, they're attacking it for their own reason. They see it as this bureaucracy, this blob, as they refer to it, that is very liberal and so forth. They see that, having that very outsider mentality, but they certainly don't represent the interests of the British working class. They want to privatize all of this stuff, sell it off, break it up. But they're resting upon this real sense of mistrust and anger that exists.
Yeah,
I think the Prince Andrew one is the really should be the one right at the.
Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, the Prince Andrew one I think is one of the most incredible scandals. I mean, this has been going on for years now. This has been going on since the whole Epstein scandal blew up. It was well known that he was friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and then this photograph appears of Virginia Giuffre, who I believe was 17 at the time.
This is one of the victims of...
who accused Prince Andrew of being one of her abusers. She was one of the victims in this disgusting sex ring of that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had put together, taking poor working class girls from the area around their mansion and then bringing them in and offering them a bit of money and then sexually abusing them. And Prince Andrew was implicated in that and accused. He denied it, and then he settled out of court with Virginia Giuffre. He claimed he'd never even met this woman, even though there's photographic evidence. Yeah. And then he settles out of court for £12 million with this woman that he's never met, apparently. Yeah. Throughout all of this, he was allowed to step back from public life in terms of he didn't carry out royal duties, but he was still a prince and so on. And the Buckingham Palace, the monarchy, they stood fully 100% behind him the whole time. Well, now it's come out that this has become Virginia Giuffre herself tragically committed suicide this year, and her autobiography has come out, Nobody's Girl, and it details that not one but multiple allegations against Andrew, on at least 3 occasions, including an orgy with Epstein, like the most disgusting stuff. But not only that, that for example, he has accused himself, Andrew, she alleges, gave Jeffrey's, it involved like a troll campaign against Virginia Giuffre. You had a situation where other accusations have come out against Andrew that he was basically, he gave social security number of Virginia Giuffre to his bodyguard, paid by the taxpayer, paid by the royal household, you know. And was even getting in touch with the Met Police to try and get dirt on Virginia Giuffre, you know, any information, personal information they could provide. These are the allegations that are coming out now. So in other words, like the abuse of this working class woman and these poor, you know, defenseless individuals by the most powerful institutions of the British state, at the very heart of the British state and the monarchy. And now finally, the King Charles has taken away his title. Not without first of all saying that he could stay at the Royal Lodge and continue living there. He had to then backtrack on that.
The Royal Lodge, by the way, is not just a little hut.
Yeah, it's a little lodge on the side of it. No, it's a 30-bedroom palace, but he's not going to be able to live there.
Oh, poor guy.
Poor guy. He's going to have to move to this mansion in Sandringham, and he will continue to live off the wealth that he's accumulated and that he gets off his brother.
I think one of the things that's one of the processes that we see here is that, you know, in ordinary times, there is this idea that those in power, they know what they're doing, right? Ordinary people they look down, and they kind of assume that there are people out there who know better than us, and they're running our society. But with the rise of these scandals, in and of themselves, they're not how do you say? It's not a question of what this particular scandal, that particular scandal, but what it does, it reveals the true nature of the ruling class, right? And this idea that there's actually no one in charge. There's no adults in charge, right? Adults in the room, so to say. Not only that, but that the people in charge are criminals, and they have the opposite of our interests at heart.
And they feel like they have every right to be criminals and do what they want and to...
Yeah. And there is this, I think this question of corruption needs to be answered because, you know, there's a lot of people who've been talking about the Gen Z revolutions and saying, oh, corruption, it's just about corruption, it's not about the capitalist system. But we have to explain that corruption is a natural part of the capitalist system. It's not true, like some people say, that capitalism is just a corruption scheme. It's just like people paying each other money under the table and doing these shady deals. But corruption is a part of the system. As soon as you have as long as you have a capitalist society where some people are capitalists, they live off. That means that they control big businesses, the big corporations and so on, and they live off of the exploitation of the working class. And other people, working class people, don't own anything and have to sell their labor power in order to survive. You will have inequality, and you will have a hunt for profit. The capital is trying to go places where it can make the most amount of profit. Now, obviously, you can make a lot of profit owning a major corporation and making billions of dollars every year in revenue. But you can also find other ways. The state today, that's always been the case, by the way, but the state is a major source of profits. Huge amounts of contracts in the healthcare system, in just the running of the system. Any contract you want to dole out, the IT system, which I remember a few years ago there was the question of who's gonna which cloud servers were the American state gonna use, and the contract was $10 billion. I think Microsoft won that one. I'm not sure about that. But there's billions and billions of that's the most legalized form of corruption. But behind those contracts, who gets those contracts? Obviously, as long as you have that kind of money swirling around, there's going to be business interests, there's going to be individual interests coming in. And as a consequence of the system, as a byproduct of the system, you're going to see graft. I mean, the American military, for example, I was reading about it. There's such open open kind of corruption about where the military-industrial complex places their production lines, and they will be paying different, how to say, congressmen, different districts and so on. And there's a whole back and forth of money moving hands and interests at stake, at heart, where this money is going to come from, who's going to pay for these contracts, who's going to get the contracts, and so on and so forth. So corruption is a natural derivative of this system, and it is also a natural part of, how to say, part of the revolutionary reawakening of the people.
Yes.
You know, the people who they're angry at, the people who are doing the corruption, are the ruling class or important representatives of them. And our task is not to denounce or just to scoff it off. Oh, it's just corruption. It has nothing. No. We have to say, yes, this is what these people are. This is the nature of the people in charge. This is what they're about. And no matter how many times you can remove them, look at Ukraine. They've removed one. They've had one corruption scandal after. In fact, the people who are behind this corruption scandal themselves were booted out for corruption. People like Poroshenko, who's now supporting
the investigation.
He's one of the oligarchs who's a former president who's supporting this investigation. He's clearly made an alliance with this Nabu and Sapo. He was corrupt himself. Why? It's a byproduct of the system itself, and it's not going anywhere. The war in Ukraine is not about corruption, but the corruption shows the true nature of it, or rather the true class nature of it. It's a capitalist war fought by Western imperialism against Russia. That's what the war in Ukraine is. It's meant to. It's not. Yeah, a lot of people are making a lot of money out of it, and they have an interest in keeping it going. But it's also the main thing is it's a war of U.S. imperialism and the American ruling, a big chunk, if not the dominant chunk of the American and Western ruling class, trying to drag Russia down, trying to subjugate Russia for their own narrow reasons, of course. And of course, they represent a very, very corrupt and decrepit system. And one of the ways they keep it going is through corruption.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think sometimes, sometimes in the advanced capitalist countries, the picture is portrayed that corruption is something that happens in the third world. It happens in poor countries. Yeah. Of course, corruption is rife in poor countries, but it's also rife in rich countries. It's rife in countries like Britain. I had a friend who was who shall not be named, who worked in HS2, and he says, "Ben, you have
what's HS2?
The high-speed rail development. Tens of billions were involved in that, and construction companies would, they would offer to do it for a certain amount.
Yeah,
they would take that contract, they would give, and then they would subcontract it for a smaller amount until it gets to the actual person who does the work.
Yeah."
They would just be taking a cut basically, and it was widely regarded as a huge milch cow for what is corruption basically.
Yeah,
and that happens in all sectors, in all parts of the economy, and then there are less obvious forms of corruption. I mean, this director general of the BBC who resigned. He used to be, I think, the vice chair or something of a conservative association, very close to the Conservative Party, then worked for an American corporation, then works for a public broadcaster. I mean, there's a revolving door. And many of these ministers now, they're taking gifts. Is that direct corruption? If you take a football ticket from as a well done, congratulations on getting elected. There's nods and winks with the expectation that if you do the right thing now, later you'll be appointed on the board of some big company. If you as the health secretary help our private pharmaceutical company out, then you will show the skills necessary to work for our private pharmaceutical company when you get out the other side of your political career. Yeah. So it's an intrinsic part of the capitalist system, and it's also one of the most I would say it's one of the most obvious forms of the rottenness of this system as well. The more rotten, the more it's one of the most overt and hated forms of, just whilst it's the injustice of it as well. So we're told this fairy story about capitalism. If you work hard, you'll do well.
Yeah.
Ordinary people are working so hard just to get by. And then they see these people that are just skimming it off the top or taking gifts or whatever else. And that anger, I think, is progressive. And that anger is correct. It's just that what we need to do is connect it to the capitalist system.
Yeah.
And what the point is that we see in these Gen Z revolutions. In Bangladesh right now, the political force which is developing and growing is Jamaat-e-Islami, the Islamists. Because they railed against the corruption of the old regime. They were somewhat persecuted by the old regime. But they say, yeah, we're against corruption, we're against this. The problem is a lack of piety, that it's a lack of morality and so on. So they bring in their answers. Farage comes in and brings in his. It's this closed club of people that scratch each other's backs, and it's a liberal elite, you know. So the point is that in the absence of a clear alternative, other forces will jump into that vacuum. The Trumps, the Farages, and so forth. And they'll make hay out of this question of corruption.
Well, let's outline then here at the end what our alternative is. I think I would say it like this: in order to combat corruption, you need to go to the root of corruption. First of all, that comes from private property, from the basis of capitalism. As long as there is private property of the means of production, we're not talking about the small houses and little shops here and there and little workshops and small companies. But the major banks, the major conglomerates, the major industries, the commanding heights of the economy, they are the primary source of all corruption. That is where all the wealth and profit hunting and profit motives come from. So they need to be nationalized. That's number one. They need to be taken into public ownership. But then there's the question of, rightfully, a lot of people say, well, nationally owned companies are just as corrupt. In fact, in Ukraine, they're talking about corruption increasing as the state has increased its ownership and control over the energy grid. So obviously, we need to answer that as well. Number one, you need to have transparency in the bookkeeping. That means all of the books of the major companies needs to be open and transparent for everyone. None of this secret business deals. So everyone can see where the money is going. And then number two, in the state apparatus, first of all, you need to have the same transparency. You need to have, not like today, where you have a state where you elect a tiny group of people, but then 99% of the state, all of the main kind of key positions within the state apparatus is not elected by anyone. This so-called sham of the division of powers, the executive and the legislative. No, we say all of the main, positions of power in the state should be elected. And be held accountable. And then you would also say that no one within the state or nationalized companies would receive a wage higher than an average worker's wage. And therefore, their incentive would, the people in the state and the companies would then have an incentive to raise the wages of everyone, not of themselves. And also a fusion of the education system with the state, in the sense that everyone should be trained up to be able to perform the basic duties of the state, bookkeeping and normal overseeing, and through that creating some sort of a rotation where ordinary people participate in the state, and you don't have the rise of a crusted state bureaucracy which can develop its own interests. In other words, open the doors, take control over the main levers of power in society, the economy of the state, take control of that into the control of the majority of the population, and then open the doors and open the books for everyone to see what's going on. And raise lower the income of the top layers of the state to be that of an average worker's wage. Of course, that should be an average worker's wage, should be a good wage. So that their interests are not different from the rest of society, because as it is now, obviously living the high life, it automatically gives you a different type of outlook to life. That's how I would put it. What do you think? Do you have any final words?
No, I don't have anything else to add to that. No, I think that the point is that we need to connect with that mood in society, which is extremely progressive, and but can take a reactionary form if it's not channeled, if it's not connected. Looking at the figures, I won't give these figures because I don't know if there's time for that sort of stuff. But if you look at the average reform voter, they're in favor. They're not free marketeer, extreme right-wing capitalists. They're on average more in favor of nationalization than the average British voter.
Well, give us the figures.
I don't actually have all of the figures, but I don't have the figures specifically for reform voters. But I can say that if you look at the figures of the general population, I actually gave these on the Spectre of Communism podcast, so there's a bit
okay.
for those that it's been pre-recorded. There might be a bit of repetition here, but across the British population, support for nationalisation of water is 82% now. In 2017, which was seen as the height of the leftward shift of British society with the rise of Corbyn, it was 59%, so a huge increase. Today, 76% of people are in favour of nationalising the railways. In 2017, it was 60%. Energy companies, it's 71%, up from 53%, and so on and so forth. And if you actually look at the average for reform voters, because you think Corbyn fell and reform rose, they are on average more in favour of nationalisation by and large than the average British voter. So there hasn't been a shift to the right. There's enormous anger at this corruption, at this rottenness, at this elite as they see it. I'll say one thing that I think is interesting, where reform voters are significantly less in favour of nationalisation is universities and the BBC, because they see them as these elite institutions, they see them as where the experts, the elite, they lie to us. So they're happy to see them destroyed, dissolve them, get rid of them. That's precisely where people like Farage come in and say, yes, it's the liberal, establishment and so forth, rather than the capitalist class.
What we need is nationalization under workers' control, not nationalization under the control of the representatives of the bourgeoisie.
This bureaucracy. No, that wouldn't go down well with reform voters. But the program that you outlined, it could actually connect with these people that are supposedly moving to the far right, as well as connecting, of course, because there's a polarization in Britain, which we see everywhere. With the Green voters and others that are shifting sharply to the left.
Zoran Mamdani won by calling himself a democratic socialist. He was attacked for being a communist by Donald Trump. And he had millions of people, 1 million people voted for him. And in Britain as well, Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, he suddenly is talking about nationalizing the utilities and railing against the establishment and so on.
Very skillful.
And they have 150,000 members now.
Your
party, although they made a mess of it, because of their own infighting, but by standing up on a left kind of platform, they got 800,000 people to sign up to joining them. Now Zara Sultana, who's one of the leaders, we'll have to see what happens with this party, because the infighting and the maneuvering and the backstabbing is still going on. And it's obviously undermining them. And the Greens are now have a head start. But Zara Sultana is making some very radical noises. She's saying that we should, capitalism is the problem. We need to nationalize the commanding heights of the industry. The whole system needs to go. The working class needs to take power. All that is this. And I think she's connecting. I mean, if they hadn't done all this mess in the party itself, that would be the program that would be connecting. And and that would undermine someone like Farage, because Farage could only exist as long as no one was giving a radical left alternative, a radical working class alternative.
And Farage is going to find himself probably in power in the next period. That's when it's going to be put to the test. So if the left could get its act together in terms of actually putting together a program that can connect, and then enormous opportunities are going to come up, because when Farage gets to power, what's he going to do? What is the answer he gives to all of this?
There's all this debt. There's all the economy is going the way it is. What's he going to do?
It's a big mess. There's a productivity crisis, and he's saying, immigrants are the problem. Immigrants are to blame. But the point of the fact of the matter is, we go back to those figures on the British economy, right? There's this 30 billion pounds hole in the budget, and a lot of it is because there's been this downgrading of productivity, because there's a lack of investment. How are the capitalists solving this lack of investment? By squeezing the working class harder, by pushing downwards on wages. That's how they're boosting their profits to get out of this crisis. And that means they need large supplies of cheap labor. And that's what migration is for. That's the function it solves for the capitalist class. So he's going to get into power, inheriting this enormous, deficit, enormous debt, ballooning debt. I think there's something like
100%. It's 98% of GDP now.
Yeah, we pay more. 111 billion pounds a year in Britain is spent on interest repayment.
Only interest, yes.
Just interest, which is more than the education budget. So he's going to inherit this, and he's going to have no solutions. So what is the left going to do in that situation? Well, there's going to be enormous opportunities in a short period of time. The question is whether the left can actually capitalize on this. I mean, yes, you said your party has been something of a debacle, but I don't think that the key question is this. They could recover in time if they actually if they actually had clear ideas. The problem is precisely that although Zara Sultana says some very radical sounding things, I mean, the latest thing she came out with, she was quoting Marx. She was even quoting Lenin, I think. Without revolutionary theory,
there can't be no revolutionary.
There can be no revolutionary movement. I think I got that back to front, but I'm sure she quoted it better than I did. But the point is, she says these very radical things. But it's very interesting. Just before coming in here, I listened to an interview with Nick Robinson from the BBC, interviewed Zara Sultana, and he asked her about her position on NATO, and she said it's an imperialist alliance. It's what did she say? She said, it's an imperialist alliance, and look at Libya, look at Afghanistan. We need welfare, not warfare. Actually, slogans that we're using. We would agree with everything that she says.
We started using those slogans.
Maybe she took them from us. I don't know.
Welfare, not warfare.
They're common property.
Yeah.
You want to use our slogans, use our slogan. We would encourage you to use more of our slogans. Yeah. But then Nick Robinson pressed her on this question. Okay, you want to leave NATO? Well, how are we going to defend ourselves? How are we going to defend our country? Are you just going to leave Ukraine in this situation? You're not going to defend against Russia and Russian fascism? And then she started to break down. Actually, what is the content? She says, well, what we need is we need a new internationalism working with our European neighbors. We need to address, and we'll come together for security, and we'll be driven by peace, driven by addressing the climate crisis, driven by diplomacy rather than aggression and imperialism. In other words, the British state, with her at the head, presumably, will just start to encourage and try to win over and convince the French imperialists, the German imperialists, the others, to get together and try the diplomatic route to this Ukraine. I mean, it shows that actually you scratch the surface of this revolutionary language. It's a reformist position that we can convince the ruling class to do better. A pacifist position that that imperialism is just a bad decision that is taken, but a nicer, more moral decision could be taken, rather than actually getting to the root of it, which is in precisely private property. It's in the private ownership of the means of production and the interests of the capitalist class, which drive towards imperialist war, and that you can need to overthrow capitalism to achieve this program. And that's the problem. It's no matter how radical the language, if you don't break with capitalism, the logic of capitalism is what Starmer's government is trying to do, which is cuts, attacks, tax increases for the poor, increased military spending to defend imperialist interests abroad. You can speak in the most left-wing language, but if you don't break with capitalism, you're going to end up carrying out the program of the capitalist class, and you're going to end up tying yourself in knots and even fluffing the whole opportunity, as Corbyn did before even getting into power, because you show that weakness, you become exposed before actually getting there. So that's I think where I would.
Yes, that's why that is our raison d'être. That is our reason for being.
You could say,
which is precisely to unify this struggle against capitalism. And bring it to its logical conclusion, and realizing that half measures don't solve anything. The only solution to all of these problems, whether it's corruption, whether it's war, whether it's the cost of living crisis, is by uprooting the system as a whole. As I said, through expropriating the property of the richest people in these countries, putting the commanding heights of the economy under workers' control and management, so that they're democratically controlled and managed by the workers of those companies themselves. Integrating them into a planned economy, which is, again, democratically discussed, nationally voted for, and in introducing a new state apparatus, a new form of state, a new form of democracy, which is real democracy, with full transparency at all levels, and all state officials to work on to be electable and recallable, and to work on a worker's wage. I think that's how I would sum it up. What do you think?
Very well said.
Should we end it here?
I don't have anything else to add.
Okay.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. We're going to see you a lot more in the next period. And for all of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in. Please, if you've gotten this far, it might mean that you agree and you support our ideas. If you do, please don't forget to press like, share our material, join our channels on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Music, wherever you see it, and help us spread the ideas of communism. And if not, then we'll still be here next week, and you can tune in next Thursday, 6 p.m. UK time. Thank you very much.